At the family gathering, I was labeled poor, then an incredible surprise revealed my true wealth. Sarah stood on the doorstep, her modest dress clinging to her body, feeling the weight of judgment as she looked up at her Aunt South's sprawling estate. Each year, the family reunion felt like an elaborate stage built for her cousins to showcase their success, draped in designer clothes and exotic tales that left her feeling small. Even now, her stomach twisted with anxiety, a storm of emotions welling inside her. 2 jobs waitressing and assisting in an office barely covered the bills, let alone allowed for indulgences. She felt the familiar stings of inadequacy, a label she couldn't shake, the poor cousin. The sounds of laughter and hustle welcomed her. Children shrieking with joy, warm embraces exchanged among adults, and the aroma of grilled burgers set her mouth watering. It should have felt like home, but Sarah felt like an intruder. That familiar smile plastered on her face faltered as whispers floated around her. "Oh, look, it's Sarah. How's the single mother life?" One cousin trilled, her tone sweet yet dripping with sarcasm that cut deep. Each word wrapped around Sarah's heart tighter than her own threads of desperation, reminding her of just how different her path had been from those around her. Standing there, she couldn't shake the memories of late-night shifts and juggling Ethan's soccer practices with her second job. Every day a painful struggle between exhaustion and determination to give him a brighter future. Why did they see her sacrifices as less? Yet here she was, at an event meant to unify, feeling the divide more than ever. Her mind raced, reflecting on the choices she made that left her feeling related, yet so far removed. Would this year be different? The dread of snide comments and raised eyebrows surrounded her like a suffocating blanket. Before her spiraling thoughts could take root, Uncle Jack stood atop a picnic table, commanding immediate silence. The storm within her gave way to curiosity as he unraveled a surprise that pulled her back from the edge. "Today, we're honored to unveil a scholarship in memory of Sarah's father." His voice rang clear, yet as soon as the words left his lips, a current ran through the crowd, shifting from disbelief to admiration. Shockwaves resonated in her chest as he spoke of her father's passion for supporting students like her, those striving against the odds. And suddenly, a flicker of pride sparked within her. In that moment, all those late nights spent poring over textbooks, those community projects born from her limited resources, fought to re-emerge into her consciousness as rewards rather than burdens. She was bound to something noble. Yet, beneath that flourish of realization simmered uncertainty. What did it mean to her family? Would their envy echo loud enough to drown out the respect? Just as waves of discomfort crashed over her at the implications of her poor cousin labeled transforming, a voice cut through the air, dripping with disdain. A cousin sneered, "Snakes in the grass." The tension froze the moment, her throat tight with the challenge of denying judgment. In that pulsating silence, Sarah felt every eye on her labeled, judged, torn between the value of moral wealth and superficial success. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the conversations began buzzing again, Sarah stood at a precipice of transformation, her internal conflict swirling in a cyclone of emotion. What did it truly mean to be wealthy? Nothing visible could compare to what she fought to build. Yet does verbal respect matter if it came wrapped in contempt? The lines were drawn as the family murmurs rose and fell around her, and with that weight, she felt more isolated than ever. Her story, once tied to the threads of disappointment, now held the power to disrupt the very narratives that sought to define her. What lingering turmoil lurked beneath acceptance? As the reunion continued, she braced herself, knowing whether she'd tear apart the familial fabric or weave a new legacy would soon be revealed. As laughter mingled with the clinking of glasses, Sarah felt like a tightrope walker, teetering above a precarious abyss. The whispers thrummed in her ears, wrapping around her like a vice. She was hyper-aware of the careful smiles of her relatives, overhearing their snide remarks in an insidious loop in her mind. Look at her, isn't it cute that she thinks she can achieve anything? A part of her wanted to scream, to unveil the reality behind her struggles, contextualizing the plate-juggling act of her life, the love poured into every decision she made for Ethan. Yet another part, the one conditioned to silence, told her to keep floating along the surface. With each passing moment, Uncle Jack's words reverberated within her. His tribute was more than an acknowledgement of her father. It was a reminder of her lineage, of the tenacity that coursed through her veins. She realized that her father had been the underdog as well. He had fought to elevate their family, scraping together a living while instilling dreams of betterment in Sarah's heart. The memory of his passionate cries for education ignited a fire within her, igniting the question of whether that same fight now echoed in her voice. Could she redefine who she was in the eyes of her family? The scholarship offered tangible proof of her worth, yet the idea stirred a cocktail of pride and trepidation in her stomach. She felt invisible lines drawn between her and the rest of the family, boundaries marked by money, status, and judgment. This moment could either be her crucifixion or her resurrection, and how she chose to navigate it was entirely up to her. As she surveyed the crowd, each face revealed a story, people compressing their versions of success into neat packages, but she had learned to scaffold her life without such adornments. The deep hollows beneath their surface stories only revealed themselves when darkness flickered. Sarah had endured the loneliness of late nights and bad days, where the tasks of motherhood and work melded into strenuous experiences that became her badge of honor. In an unexpected moment of clarity, the tension around her began to shift. A voice, her own, simple but powerful, slipped to the forefront of her mind. A wave of resolve washed over her as she refocused, envisioning her path not dictated by her relatives' perceptions, but illuminated by her determination to reshape her narrative. Maybe it's time to confront this, she thought, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. She couldn't evade the judgment any longer. Poise demanded integrity and truth. The next step meant stepping away from the shadows, owning her reality with dignity rather than allowing herself to be cornered by opinions. The murmurs shifted again as her confidence built, warding off insecurities like an armor. Perhaps the same qualities that made her feel less than could, with conviction, serve as her foundation. She was proud of her work ethic. She excelled in balancing challenges creatively, pushing against the walls that attempted to confine her. As the festivities resumed, her heart raced not just from nerves, but anticipation. Would she address the unspoken tension? What would she say? Sarah understood this moment could pivot her reality, catapulting her from poor cousin to a spokesperson for the resilience she embodied. Margins of judgment might blur when faced with truth, and she planned to paint her life with broad strokes of authenticity. "Hey, Sarah." A voice pulled her from her contemplation, and she forced a smile as she turned to face her cousin. "It's so good to see you. I was just saying how inspiring it is that you're going back to school." Inhaling deep, taking in the warmth of potential unity, she felt the surge of power coursing through her. "Yes, I am," she replied, her voice steady, daring to rise with conviction. "I believe in my future. And maybe we can all work on celebrating our differences rather than using them against one another, right?" Her heart thudded as silence swallowed the crowd once more, but within that silence was a call for change. Her change. She could feel the eyes upon her shift from skepticism to surprise, just as her chosen narrative began its well-deserved ascendancy. She braced herself against the soft wind, stirring with hope and resolve. Sarah's mind spun with what came next. This was merely the tipping point. She would have to reveal more emotion, ambition, dreams. Each step forward could pave the way not only for her own clarity, but for her family's understanding. But as she glanced around, a shadow drifted, one she recognized immediately. A familiar face glared from the distance, lips curled in disdain. Sarah's stomach churned, warmth turning icy with recognition. The confrontation she had avoided for too long lurked, ready to emerge, demanding her attention. The moment of truth was approaching. Would she face it head-on, embracing her worth with unapologetic ferocity? The realization hit her. She was on the brink of a revelation profound enough to shake the very foundations of her family's understanding of wealth, both moral and material. It took a moment for Sarah to find her voice amid the rising tide of uncertainty as she locked eyes with her cousin, Jessica. Just steps away, the tension in the air thickened, wrapping around her like a vine, squeezing tightly. Jessica's sneer bore an intensity that threatened to unravel the courage Sarah had just summoned. The silence hung heavy, and Sarah fought hard against the urge to retreat. Instead, she stood firm, breathing through the impulse to recoil under scrutiny. This was her moment. This time, she wouldn't falter. Just as she would teach Ethan to face challenges head-on, she would turn the stakes now onto herself. "What's your plan?" Jessica's voice dripped with sarcasm, as if taunting Sarah's ambitions. "Are you going to tell us all about how you're going to run the world from the community college?" A rush of heat flushed her cheeks, but instead of cowering, Sarah felt a steel threading through her resolve. "Yes," she replied, and for the first time, it felt genuine. "I am going to community college. It's a stepping stone, not a setback. I'm learning and pushing myself." The murmurs erupted again, both in disapproval and curiosity. Yet within the crowd, she spotted allies, cousins, and distant relatives whose faces softened, understanding written in their eyes. They weren't all the critics she feared, and she could feel the presence of those willing to recognize her struggle. "Look, Jess, we each have our paths," Sarah continued, finding a rhythm in her voice, her pulse thundering in time with her growing confidence. "You might define success by your job title or your possessions, but I'm redefining mine. It's about growth and the future I want for Ethan." As each word fell from her lips, something shifted. Her heart raced, not with anxiety, but with burgeoning empowerment. Sarah was no longer the object of scrutiny. She was sculpting her own narrative right there in front of them, stepping away from the shadows of their misconceptions. Education isn't a privilege, it's an opportunity. She pressed on, feeling the weight of her family's South history drive her. "My dad believed in that. He worked hard despite everything but still never lost sight of what mattered. I'm not ashamed of where I come from. I'm proud. It's fueled every ounce of effort I've put into this scholarship and my future." A flicker of surprise danced across Jessica's face, but she quickly masked it with a scoff. "Good luck with that, you'll need it." The remark stung, yet it wasn't nearly as painful as before. All at once, Sarah realized that Jessica's disdain wasn't her enemy. It was a catalyst, pushing her further. As Sarah glanced around, she saw her family's expressions shift, confusion and contemplation lighting their faces. Did they finally grasp the depths of her experience, the inherent worth that lay beyond just financial gain? Perhaps they were visible lines drawn around each of them, not just her. With every assertion of her ambitions, she caught glimpses of understanding. The locked windows of perception were beginning to peel open just a fraction. Was this what success felt like? Not just for her, but for all of them? In that charged moment, uncertainty turned to purpose, and she embraced the vulnerability, a willingness to bridge the gaps with her truth. The murmurs around her began to change, moving from skepticism to acknowledgement. It wasn't just about what Jessica thought, nor was it simply a personal battle. It was an evolutive confrontation. "I know who I am, and I want to apologize for my journey," Sarah declared, casting a glance at her cousin to ensure sincerity accompanied every word. "I want to let anyone define my worth." And as she stood firm, a sense of clarity descended upon her. She was showing them not just a fight, but a living illustration of resilience. A hand went to her shoulder, pulling her attention away. It was Ethan, standing nervously beside her, with wide eyes. She knelt down to him, heart swelling with affection. "I'm showing everyone that it's okay to start from the bottom." Ethan squared his shoulders. "And I'm proud of you, Mommy." His support felt like a shield as Sarah took steadier breaths, knowing that her fight wasn't solitary, But just as she prepared to transition to a new phase in the conversation, a whisper caught her ear. "You think you're so much better than us now?" Jessica's voice cut through the hope, a razor-laced challenge that left Sarah's stomach hollow. Suddenly, Sarah faced a different question altogether. How far would she go to defend her resolve against someone who had always belittled her? Did she have the right to engage in such a battle against family? The internal whirlwind swirled as she realized the stakes. It wouldn't just be a verbal exchange, but the beginning of defining who she was and what she would continue to become. As the fire ignited within her, a revelation struck this moment. This growing confrontation with Jessica was the catalyst to reappraise every form of wealth. The family ties that frayed under the pressure of judgment could also be mended through authenticity. Would she rise to the occasion, engaging in the dialogue necessary to reshape not only their understanding but her very existence among them? The looming question hovered, promising a deeper conflict and potential growth. What revelations would emerge if she chose to lean into that confrontation, to transform judgment into shared experience? The opportunity for transformation was here, just waiting for her to grasp it. Sarah felt the weight of Jessica's words linger like an unshakable fog, wrapping around her thoughts as she forced herself to breathe through the tension. The sense of hollowness that swept through her was met with an unexpected gust of determination. Would she shrink back or confront this head-on? "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Jess," she replied, her voice steady despite the rumble of her heart. "What I think is that we all have the right to pursue our dreams, regardless of where we start." The murmur of the crowd shifted again, some heads nodding in quiet agreement, others fixed with skepticism. Every gaze felt like a magnifying glass, intensifying her every word and action, but in this moment, she harnessed their scrutiny as fuel rather than as fear. Jessica scoffed, not ready to retreat. "Right. Go on and dream with your community college education. We'll see how far that gets you." The barb stung, yet within her, an ember sparked into recognition. Wasn't this the very narrative she had fought for? The belief that one's origin didn't dictate their destination. "You've got it all wrong, Jess. It's the resilience cultivated along the way that matters most." The room fell into a tense silence, the air thick with unspoken judgments. Jessica's disdain ignited both anger and sadness within Sarah, feeling as if she was standing on the edge of a precipice, contemplating a leap of faith into a landscape untouched by family expectations. If she continued to absorb negativity like a sponge, she'd remain entangled in others' narratives forever. But in this moment, she was acutely aware of the opportunities standing before her, the chance to steer the conversations not just for herself, but for anyone quietly grappling with similar judgments in silence. Drawing in a breath, she continued, "Education is just one part of the equation. It's not my worth that's determined by my attendance at a community college or a state university. It's about the growth, the knowledge I'm gaining to better my life and my son's. I'm not richer than you," Sarah pressed on, looking directly into Jessica's eyes, which flickered with contempt but momentarily revealed uncertainty beneath it. "But I'm striving to build something real for Ethan. That defines me." "As if that makes a difference," Jessica interjected, her bravado wavering. Yet Sarah could see it, the vulnerability crackling beneath the surface, a question haunting Jessica's facade. What if Sarah really could carve her own path? For the first time, Sarah didn't feel like an imposter in her own family. No longer did the words of her cousin fill her with dread. They ignited an urge to dig deeper into her own motivations. The battle was not just about Jessica, but about her own narrative, and she refused to let others dictate the terms. "Maybe I'm not wealthy in the traditional sense," she continued, her voice gathering strength, "but I am rich in ambition, dreams, and the lessons from my past." With each word, she saw the seeds of acknowledgement sprout among some who had been silent observers. A subtle shift happened in the room, a transformation she hadn't anticipated. The waves of ridicule began to diminish in the face of her relentless conviction, and the tension in the air softened, shifting from hostility to curiosity. It was exhilarating, visible change forming before her eyes. When Jessica's eyes narrowed, entrapment fading into a semblance of respect, Sarah knew she had struck a chord. Maybe you should consider some of the lessons I'm learning now, instead of dismissing them. What if there truly was something valuable in this confrontation? Would her resilience spark a fire in others, escalating the tides of change over the murky waters of family perception? With a tremor of excitement coursing through her, Sarah felt a tingling promise of newfound connections. Perhaps even Jessica could become part of this growth. As her thoughts swirled with intention and possibilities, a small voice broke into the electric current of the moment. "Mommy, can we go home now?" Ethan's innocent inquiry, tinged with boredom, grounded her immediately. Kneeling before him, she brushed a hand through his hair, her heart full of love. "We can talk about this later, buddy." Yet as they prepared to leave, she caught sight of Jessica's expression, caught somewhere between disbelief, admiration, and introspection. That was when Sarah realized she had just begun to unravel the complexities of her family's legacy. How many others were waiting for liberation from judgment. Determined, she hugged Ethan closer as they crossed the threshold toward their exit, yet an undeniable urge pulsed inside her, a question tiered within context. Would confronting Jessica truly lead to future healing, or was this just another battle in a war yet to be fought? In that moment, as they stepped into the cool evening air, Sarah sensed the winds of change stirring not just within herself, but echoing throughout her family, whispering possibilities. But with that whisper came the anxiety of the unresolved confrontation looming before her. What barriers would she need to breach to create a lasting impact on her family's understanding of wealth and worth? And how profoundly would it change her own trajectory if she persisted? As Sarah stepped into the twilight, she took a moment to absorb the tranquil night, her pulse gradually settling down from the heated exchange. Each breath filled her with a fresh resolve, yet questions loomed ominously in her mind. Jessica's contempt had stung, but the encounter had illuminated a new path. She could no longer view her education as a mere credential. It was a stepping stone toward a vision that transcended mere survival. "Mommy, are you okay?" Ethan's voice pulled Sarah back into the present, grounding her thoughts. "I'm great, sweetheart." She smiled, though there was a tinge of uncertainty she couldn't shake. The confrontation had ignited a fire within her, one that demanded further exploration. She had stood up for her beliefs, but the real challenge was applying that newfound strength to her life moving forward. During the drive home, the silence weighed heavily. Ethan fiddled with his action figures in the back seat, oblivious to the storm brewing within her. Sarah's mind raced as she recalled how Jessica's words had probed at her insecurities, each jab a reminder of the various fears she had fought to suppress. But why had Jessica's perceptions struck a deeper chord? Would addressing her family's dismissive attitude finally lead to breakthrough healing or further divide? When they arrived home, Sarah felt an unfamiliar energy shift from within, a pull toward change that promised growth not only for herself, but for Ethan as well. She could almost visualize her future, one painted in bright strokes of achievement, an educator, a role model. But at what cost? Would she risk alienating her family or, worse, repeating the cycle of disappointment that had characterized much of her upbringing? As the darkness enveloped the neighborhood, Sarah set Ethan up with his favorite movie and retreated to the kitchen. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of regret as she leaned against the counter, grappling with the implications of her actions. What about the lessons she could glean from this familial turbulence? How could she ensure that Ethan inherited the resilience she was beginning to cultivate? She picked up her phone and scrolled through contacts, contemplating reaching out to her professor. The man had shown faith in her potential in ways she had never expected. If she could harness his mentorship, perhaps she would solidify the beliefs she had begun to articulate today. Yet, amidst the professional aspirations, she felt a surge of vulnerability brewing. Would admitting her ambitions ignite pride or judgment in her family? A sudden buzz pulled her attention back. It was a message from Jessica. "Can we talk?" Surprised but intrigued, Sarah felt a mix of dread and anticipation. This could either close the door on the progress she felt or open a new one altogether. She deliberated, considering that confrontation had already brought a flicker of respect out of Jessica. Maybe this didn't have to be just about her own validation but could foster understanding between them. With heart pounding, she typed back a simple, "Sure." When, sipping her coffee, a rush of determination coursed through her. What if this was more than a reconciliation, a chance to rewrite her relationship with her cousin, and possibly shift the family dynamics she had long regarded as fixed? Each second felt like the clock was ticking down to something significant, profoundly shaping her future with every key she pressed. The uncertainty of the outcome didn't cloud the clarity behind her intentions any longer. She was at a threshold. There was no turning back. The night had become a canvas ready for her to paint her narrative, but as she sat surrounded by the family portraits that hung proudly on the walls, a question remained. Would this conversation with Jessica open the floodgates for deeper understanding, or would it reinforce the judgments she sought to dissolve? The moment of reckoning loomed. How could she navigate this pivotal exchange without losing herself in the process? With resolve hardening inside her, she prepared for whatever lay ahead. Aware that the crossroads before her might steer her toward a future she was finally ready to claim. The following day dawned crisp and bright, transforming Sarah's anxious anticipation into a palpable energy. The sun poured through the kitchen window, illuminating the countertops and banishing the shadows of uncertainty that had lingered. She poured herself another cup of coffee, grounding herself in the routine of morning while the upcoming conversation with Jessica echoed in her mind. As Ethan finished his breakfast, Sarah watched him with a keen awareness. His innocence and resilience were reminders of the stakes at play. She needed to set a precedent for him, one that demonstrated strength, integrity, and the courage to advocate for oneself. Each of Ethan's innocent questions about dinosaurs, superheroes, or the next episode of his favorite show was an opportunity for Sarah to instill valuable lessons about facing adversity, standing firm, and aspiring higher. Today was no longer about just confronting Jessica. It was about carving a future for both of them. After dropping Ethan off at his friend's house, Sarah found herself parked outside her university, the familiar stone facade invoking a wave of nostalgia mixed with determination. Clutching her phone, she pressed it to her chest while contemplating the upcoming discussion with her professor. His belief in her had sparked the embers of ambition. Perhaps it was time to stoke that fire. As she entered his office, the walls seemed to close in as nerves snaked their way through her. But the moment he greeted her with a warm smile, those nerves began to morph into excitement. After some small talk, she found the courage to lay her ambitions bare. "I'd like your guidance on some ideas I've been brainstorming," she began, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. "I've been thinking about how to integrate more hands-on learning into the curriculum, particularly for kids who, like my son, learn best through play." Her professor listened intently, nodding as she spoke. Ideas flowed easily as she described various methods she believed would engage students in deeper ways. Gone were the bounds of insecurity. Her voice reflected the possibilities she was envisioning. It felt incredible to articulate her thoughts, to see them transform into something tangible with the encouragement she received. Following their meeting, Sarah walked out feeling lighter, as if a burden had been lifted. She had sought advice but found inspiration. This encounter flattened the mountains of doubt she had carried, indicating a shift. She wasn't just an eager learner. She was a budding educator full of potential. But as she drove home, the exhilarating clarity began to mingle with doubts again. Was she truly capable of this change? Could she redefine her place in her family, let go of her identity as the poor cousin, and step into her own power? With every question, the weight felt heavier despite earlier enlightenment. Hours later, the conversation with Jessica hovered over her like a thundercloud as they finally connected on the phone. "Hey," Jessica said, her tone softer than it had been. Sarah was surprised.
"Hi.
"Thanks for reaching out," Sarah replied, tentatively. They skated through superficialities laid over a thickness of unresolved tension. Jessica eventually broached the real subject, tentatively revealing her own insecurities about family. Surreal, vulnerable, human. That moment shook Sarah. A gut punch of realization hit her. Jessica felt the same pressure, the same fear of judgment.
Can we meet?
Jessica continued, her voice steadier. I think we need to talk about more than just our last argument. As Sarah's heart raced, curiosity blended with a touch of dread. This wasn't just about confronting family dynamics anymore. It was becoming a bridge towards healing.
Sure, when?
Sarah asked, determination welling up inside her. Tomorrow, at the park? With the sun setting on another day of clarity intermixed with doubt, Sarah knew that within each hurdle lay the potential for learning. She had a chance to not only redeem her connection with Jessica, but to challenge the very narratives that had boxed her in. The stakes were clearer than ever, drawing her closer to an understanding of herself that she had long withheld. As she lay in bed later that night, the weight of tomorrow remained heavy, but stirred with an undercurrent of hope. If the layers of familial discord could unravel into shared truths, perhaps she could discover the richness that had always been there, just hidden beneath years of confusion and contempt. The time had come to face truths she had avoided for too long. Would she emerge stronger, or would the fears of her past pull her back into the shadows? The answers lay tantalizingly just out of reach, ready to reveal themselves. The park was alive with the sound of laughter and the rustling of leaves, distant children playing while couples strolled hand in hand. Sarah lingered under the shade of an old oak, her anxieties bubbling beneath the surface. The air was thick with the scent of fresh grass and blooming flowers, a stark contrast to the turmoil swirling in her mind. This meeting was more than just a reconciliation. It was a confrontation of everything she had skirted around for far too long. As she scanned the scene, she caught sight of Jessica arriving, her familiar silhouette breaking through the park's vibrancy. There was an underlying nervousness in Jessica's posture too, evident in the tightness of her shoulders. Sarah tried to quell her nerves as they approached each other, both of them visibly hesitant, yet anchored by a shared purpose. Hey, Jessica greeted, her voice soft but carrying an unspoken weight. Thanks for coming. Of course, Sarah replied, forcing a smile. That slight elevation of her lips fell out of place in such a heavy moment. They found a bench somewhat removed from the chaos, and as they settled, an uncomfortable silence fell. Sarah's mind raced. The vulnerability of that call hung in the air, a tether connecting their fractures. I know we've had our issues, Jessica began, breaking the tension at last, but I want us to understand each other better. She paused, and Sarah glimpsed the familiar fear in Jessica's eyes, fear of judgment. It stirred something in Sarah. Me too, Sarah replied, her voice steady yet filled with the tremors of doubt. This was her chance to press for clarity and understanding amidst their shared past of hurtful comparisons and family pressures. I was thinking back to all those gatherings, where everyone seemed to measure value, Jessica continued, words tumbling out. I've always felt like I had to prove something. There it was Jessica's own vulnerable admission. The chain of secrets that bound them was beginning to fray, and Sarah felt an insistent tug of unity. I've felt that pressure too. All those times I compared myself to you, it felt like I was fighting a battle I could never win. The weight lifted with the honesty. Jessica's brow knitted, a shifted recognition dawning upon her. I never meant to make you feel that way. Neither did I, Sarah murmured, the admission tasting bittersweet. It's just the way our family dynamics have been set up. The past echoed in her tone, yet something new lingered there as well, the potential for real understanding. As they delved deeper into family roles and expectations, Sarah recognized a shift within herself. It wasn't merely about confronting Jessica, it was about reframing her own narrative. Each revealing moment was both opening up fresh wounds and exfoliating layers of old insecurities. She felt empowered, speaking her truth had illuminated not only Jessica's struggles but her own. But what if we had a different approach? Sarah proposed, her voice stronger than before. What if, instead of vying for their approval, we created our own definitions of worth? The thought sparked something in Jessica. I would love that. Imagine what we could build together. An enthusiasm lit her face, and for the first time, Sarah felt the warmth of possibility. The conversations meandered, opening boxes of unresolved grievances, shared laughter, buried dreams. They dug deep, But amidst the exploration, Sarah found herself shedding labels, feeling free from her previous titles. With each shared story, they were weaving a new tapestry, one of strength through vulnerability rather than value, through comparison. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, sunlight dappling their faces, Sarah caught Jessica's gaze and held it for a moment too long. There was a silent promise in that look, a commitment to change. Yet, as the conversations flowed, shadows of uncertainty crept back. They needed to confront their families and the people who had shaped their insecurities. "Are we ready to face everyone?" Sarah asked, her heart racing as she thought of their family's critical eyes. "Yes," Jessica replied, firmly, her earlier hesitation replaced with a newfound resolve. Together. As they left the park, Sarah felt a swell of courage mingling with fear. The battle was far from over. With their journey ahead, she sensed the weight of her past was about to clash with the dawning of her future. The true test loomed close. Mustering courage against family expectations would soon usher into a confrontation she could no longer avoid. What lay beyond that next gathering was still uncertain, but the commitment to their newfound connection promised revelations that could redefine everything. Would advocacy translate into belonging, or would the shadows beckon once again? The answers awaited, just beyond the horizon. The following weekend unfolded with a thick, ominous air surrounding the family gathering. Sarah awoke that Saturday morning with an unsettling sense of anticipation, a restless energy simmering just beneath her skin. The past week had been a whirlwind of personal insights, some empowering moments shared with Jessica, but also an ever-growing knot of anxiety about facing their families and the expectations that loomed like storm clouds on the horizon. She dressed with care, each article of clothing chosen not to impress, but to embrace her true self. This was no ordinary family gathering. It was a chance to cultivate the new identity they had birthed together, a challenge of fortitude grounded in the acceptance of who they were, free from imposed definitions. The sensation of determination coursed through her as she chose a simple dress that hinted at her taste rather than the expected compliance with frivolity. As the afternoon sky poured golden rays onto the familiar yard of her family home, Sarah approached with a delicate blend of excitement and dread. The sounds of distant laughter intertwined with the chatter of relatives filtering through her consciousness, but they felt hazy and distant, overshadowed by her thoughts. It had always been about status and comparisons, and she feared this time would be no different. The moment she stepped inside, an unease settled like a blanket over her shoulders. Family members greeted her with their usual enthusiasm, but the unspoken judgments buzzed in the air like errant flies. She spotted her mother chatting animatedly, a smile plastered on her face as she showcased Sarah's more successful cousins, each triumph another sharp reminder of what Sarah had yet to achieve. "Sarah, you made it," her mother called, her bright eyes flickering over her daughter with a mix of warmth and conditioned expectation, the same eyes that had often conveyed disappointment. "Of course, Mom," Sarah replied, the cheer in her voice masking the tension simmering inside. As she maneuvered through the crowd, the sharp comments began to surface, each a knife aimed to peel away layers of her newfound resolve. "Have you found a good job yet? Are you seeing anyone serious?" The questions pierced through her, indecipherable layers of concern and judgment blurring into one. "Actually, I've been focusing more on what makes me happy," Sarah finally said, the words emerging from deep within. Each syllable felt foreign yet liberating, like a bridge to the unknown. The tension in her chest eased slightly, a sensation she held onto while surveying the mob of relatives around her. Jessica arrived soon after, navigating the familial chaos with a wave of familiarity. A few years younger, Jessica carried herself with a confidence that seemed to radiate from her just as vibrant light, a reminder that they were in this together. They shared knowing glances, the solidarity of their recent revelations hanging in the air like sweet perfume. But as Sarah opened up to Jessica later in a quieter corner of the yard, she noticed the whispers of discontent erupting soon after. "Did you hear that?" they murmured, casting furtive glances in their direction. "What a shame they can't see how truly lost they are." Each remark dug a little deeper, testing her resolve, urging her to revert to the comfort of doubt. Yet, she clutched at her breath, reminding herself that these words represented the past, not who she was becoming. Then came the moment that shook her core. An elder relative, known for his blunt and unfiltered remarks, approached with a serious gaze. "Sarah, if you don't get your act together, you'll be regarded as nothing poor not only in wealth but also in spirit." A torrent of indignation ignited within her. For too long, she had internalized these baseless judgments. Something fundamental within her stirred, urging her to confront not just the words spoken but the narrative that had been forced upon her. It was time to wield her voice, shaky, perhaps, but undeniably real. "Actually," she began, her heart thundering in her chest, "I'm redefining what that means for me. Wealth isn't just measured in material possessions, but in the richness of experience and relationships." The echoes of her voice faltered at first, but gained strength with every vowel, fueling a fire within her. A.S. gasps resonated through the gathering. Sarah felt Jessica's approving nod nearby. The air shifted in the yard. Something had been crackled open, a collective recognition of the fight ahead. The exchange transformed their environment. Relatives absorbed her words, some with skepticism, others intrigued. There was no turning back now. Yet, as the conversation shifted and the mood lightened considerably, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that a more profound challenge lay ahead. Would her resolve withstand the intricate tapestry of expectations woven tightly by her family? Would they allow her to break free from their definitions? As the sun dipped toward the horizon, filtering through the trees, Sarah's heart raced with questions. The air crackled with something like hope, but lingering uncertainty clung stubbornly. Would this moment catalyze acceptance or trigger an even fiercer resistance? Only time, and perhaps an unexpected revelation at this gathering, would tell. In the shifting atmosphere of familial acceptance, a delicate tension clung to Sarah as she navigated the yard, her thoughts swirling while laughter cascaded around her. After her bold proclamation, she felt exposed yet exhilarated. The question of whether her family would embrace this new version of herself loomed larger than the evening sky that was darkening overhead. Jessica, sensing the charged air, leaned in closer to Sarah. "You did it," she murmured, her expression a mix of pride and uncertainty. "Did I?" The question left Sarah's lips without thought, her self-doubt resurfacing. The supportive warmth that radiated from Jessica was palpable, yet bright smiles faded as relatives continued to congregate nearby, peeling back layers of judgment with their gazes. "It's just the beginning," Jessica replied, as if reading Sarah's internal monologue. "You planted a seed today. Just give it time." Nevertheless, anxiety coiled tightly in Sarah's stomach. Their exchanges suddenly felt superficial, condiments to the main dish that simmered beneath the surface of their gathering. Every smile from a distant relative felt like a reminder of the past she longed to transcend. As dusk cradled them, Sarah stepped away from the chaos momentarily, seeking an anchor within her own thoughts. She wandered towards a quieter corner of the yard where the shadows stretched long, reminiscent of her own insecurities. There, with crickets chirping around her, she thought of her aspirations, the freelance writing she had always wanted to pursue, the stories that waited inside her. "What if I followed through on that?" she whispered to herself, the possibilities unfurling like tendrils of smoke. Yet, that same inner critic chimed in, nudging her to confront the odds, the doubts that brewed into heavy storms in her mind. Meanwhile, the conversations among her family members continued to swirl around her. From her concealed vantage point, she overheard snippets of their discussions regarding her. She's lost her direction, one said, their tone laced with pity. Another chimed in, "It's too risky to rely on dreams." Feeling her spirit waning, Sarah closed her eyes briefly. Could they see that she was attempting to build that dream into reality? Or was she, in their eyes, merely flailing? Just then, a soft voice broke through her spiraling thoughts. "You handled that moment so well." It was her mother, standing cautiously at the periphery, an expression of contemplation replacing the earlier exuberance. "Mom?" Sarah hesitated, her heart racing in a different way now. Was this the time to lay their fragile history bare before her? I saw you stand up for yourself just now. Not many would dare to speak like that, her mother said, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. I think it's brave. Bravery felt like such an eccentric word in that moment, given the depth of her previous despair. It swayed Sarah. Could she, perhaps, allow herself to be both vulnerable and strong? Thank you, Sarah said, the sincerity of her reply unexpectedly steady. In that moment, she recognized that this wasn't merely about gaining acceptance, but embracing the pathways to her own truth. Her thoughts turned to the words she had spoken earlier. They were more than defiance. They encapsulated her exposure to authenticity. You might not like what I've decided to pursue, but I'm not doing this out of spite. I just want to be happy, Sarah continued, feeling an unfamiliar warmth fill the space between them, her mother's brows knit together, a flicker of conflict passing across her face. It was a brief but fragile moment. You wish to tell stories now. Writing? Yes. I needed to express myself, she said, tentatively explaining her vision of freelance writing and creativity, her voice echoing through the dusky quiet. Her mother's initial resistance softened into contemplation, but would this moment be enough to disrupt years of expectation? As small talk resumed around them, Sarah felt an echo of cautious hope. This unexpected exchange with her mother had shifted something, a revelation that perhaps she could fight to remain true to herself within this intricate familial web. The tension inside her began to morph into a vibrant energy. But as Sarah stood in that moment vulnerable, yet strong, she realized that true acceptance, especially from those she loved, would likely be a journey fraught with bumps and detours. But what if the next revelation during the evening nudged her even further before clarity could settle? What if the very family members she feared most were on the brink of addressing their definitions of wealth and success as well? The wind stirred, brushing against her skin like a whisper of possibility. As she glanced back at the gathering, ready to confront whatever came next, she felt the spark ignite within her. What lay ahead could either illuminate her path or plunge her back into shadows. Would she emerge as the version of herself she dared to embody, or would the expectations tighten their hold once more? The moment had arrived for another revelation to unfold. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with hues of orange and pink, Sarah found herself at a pivotal moment, standing not just on the threshold of family acceptance, but also of personal discovery. The conversations around her swirled like autumn leaves, some playful, some probing, each carrying varying degrees of judgment and curiosity. She felt a shift in the atmosphere. It was not merely about her words anymore, but about the very essence of who she was becoming. Look, Sarah's come to grace us with her tales of college life. A distant cousin piped in, her tone laced with dismissiveness. The familiar sting of inadequacy spiraled through her. Yet, rather than the usual quake of shame, a new sense of resolve crystallized inside her. Each whispered criticism became a catalyst for her purpose. I appreciate the allure of a good story, Sarah replied, turning her gaze towards the speaker, facing the crowd with newfound confidence. But I'm building a narrative that isn't solely framed by other people's definitions of success. Her voice resonated with clarity, cutting above the ambient noise. A ripple of surprise passed through her listeners, and the judgment she once felt began to dissipate. In that moment, Sarah realized she was no longer held captive by the perception of being the poor cousin. She had transcended the stereotype. Each second contributed to her evolution from inadequacy to self-assurance. As the evening progressed, she felt her family changing. Conversations began to shift as others chimed in, recognizing their own insecurities mirrored in her struggle. I've always felt the pressure to shine brighter, one of her cousins admitted, an unexpected vulnerability in her tone. It's exhausting. The cracks of judgment around Sarah began to heal as shared experiences surfaced, weaving a narrative of unity through truth. The very aspects that separated them slowly began to intertwine. Sarah stood firm, feeling a surge of unity fill the space, transforming empty chatter into meaningful discourse. Why not redesign our expectations together? She proposed, not just to her family, but to herself. What if we celebrate each other's journeys and redefine success collectively? An honest murmur of agreement rustled through the crowd, and for the first time, she was met not with disdain, but with recognition. She turned, spotting Jessica across the yard. Her expression brightened as their eyes locked. "You've inspired me," Jessica said, stepping closer, her earlier skepticism replaced with admiration. "What you've done tonight is incredible." Sarah felt a wave of warmth wash over her. Their alliance had, indeed, laid the groundwork for mutual understanding that could break through the criticisms of the past. As laughter and stories replaced barbs, Sarah felt like she was threading the fabric of resilience through the family she had once feared would never accept her dreams. With each narrative shared, they dismantled the imposing facades they had built, fostering camaraderie in vulnerability. Together they began crafting a new lineage defined by support and authenticity. The sun dipped beyond the horizon, casting a twilight glow over the gathering, and Sarah took a moment to soak in the transformation. She had stepped into her power and inspired a collective rebirth within her family. There was no longer a separation marked by success and failure, but a tapestry woven from individual triumphs and trials. Let us not forget, education is a means to enrich our lives. She began again, her heart pounding with deliberate conviction as she addressed the collective. It's about the knowledge we gain, the lessons we learn, and the ways we can lift each other along the way. A chorus of nods met her. And that very instant, Sarah achieved something monumental. She became not just a voice for herself, but a beacon for her entire family, a competent individual capable of redefining a narrative that shackled many. The scholarship announced earlier now echoed deeper than simply a financial reprieve. It was a representation of her legacy, a culmination of sacrifice past that propelled her on a journey ahead. As the night deepened, Sarah moved toward the exit, her heart buoyant with hope and resilience. "Thank you for this," she expressed softly to her family as she prepared to leave. It was clear that a shift had occurred, one that swept away the labels of yesterday. They had embraced true wealth, one forged through shared narratives and collective support, reshaping their understanding of worth. As she walked hand in hand with Ethan, a revolutionary clarity washed over her. "Mommy," he said, looking up with wide, innocent eyes, "are we going home?" "Yes, but only for tonight," she grinned, an empowering smile spreading across her face. "Tomorrow, we'll keep building our dreams together." With renewed vigor and a fortified identity, Sarah understood she held the power to create her destiny and cultivate the legacy she envisioned. Through truth, she had transformed not only her own life, but had sown the seeds of change in those she loved. She was no longer the poor cousin. She was a woman of strength, knowledge, and ambition, a testament to the fact that true wealth is born from within. Embrace yourself and step into your own story. Now lean in and hear this call to action. You need to subscribe now to our channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that lift the spirit. Leave a like immediately, as it feeds the algorithm that makes these illuminating tales possible. Comment your thoughts on Sarah's transformation, the challenges she faced, and your own theories for how it could continue. Share instantly this experience with at least 5 friends who need to see this life-changing conclusion. They deserve to be inspired too. Don't wait even one more second to act. Support the journey of personal overcoming stories today.